And what's the problem? Now, what if we had such an effective enforcement that we basically eliminated the industry? That is, we basically could really squeeze this industry out of existence. Well, then, even though I'm severely penalizing people who do this, the total cost could be quite low. And so prohibitions aren't always bad. They're bad when they're not particularly effective. When they're not particularly effective in that the total size of the market grows, then that means you're imposing a lot of costs on the suppliers, which usually means you're imposing a lot of costs on society and yourself on top of that. And therefore, it's unlikely, unless this is an extremely socially undesirable activity, that you'd want to do it. So it's interesting. You may, in fact, want to exterminate an industry that you would not want to have a modest reduction in. And let me kind of show you the example. Think about the following problem, okay? Think about it this way, and this is, so here's demand, okay? I'll make linear demand. That makes life easy. Linear demand curve, right? Here's demand, right? Now, if you think about it, and let's ignore externalities of production, like we'll ignore the fact that it costs money to imprison people and they're going to corrupt the government and all that stuff. We'll put that aside and we'll face all you're going to do is raise their total cost. But it's a competitive industry, so total cost in the industry is going to be equal to total revenue. That's all I want to impose. That the total, this industry, whatever it is, if I want to get the price up to some level, I got to get costs up to that level. So C times Q, well, that's cost per unit times Q, has to equal P times Q. That's all I need. Well, what that means is that marginal total cost equals total revenue, so marginal cost equals marginal revenue. So actually, the marginal cost curve for this industry actually looks like that. Okay? All right? Until you get to the competitive outcome, right? Until you get to the competitive outcome. And then, of course, marginal cost from there is here. Okay? But ignore that. From the competitive outcome back, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, think about what that means. Think about what that means, that if marginal revenue equals your marginal cost. Okay? And let's assume there was an externality, and let's let K equal the per unit externality. Well, then the net social value would look like that, D minus K, right? You would just subtract from the private marginal value schedule, which is the demand curve, you would just subtract the social cost. So this is the example you were talking about, an externality. Well, you might say, well, geez, that means we should go here, right? You think of that as the optimal point. Q star. And then, of course, that would imply this is P star. Is that true, though? That would equate the social marginal cost of production with the social marginal value of production. But what do you notice about that picture? Think about it. For all outputs between 0 and Q star, marginal cost of those units of output exceeds social value. For all the units beyond that point, marginal cost is below marginal value. So that's not a maximum. That's actually a minimum. That is the worst possible place to be. Right? It's the social minimum. It minimizes the net gain to society. So in this simple example, if I could freely choose to set the price anywhere I want it, I can just say I'm going to impose enough costs on suppliers to get the price up to whatever level I want. I'm just going to beat them up with sticks until the price gets up to where I want it. Right? I'm just going to impose costs on them. It says I would either want to do nothing and stay at the competitive output, or I'd want to eradicate the industry. That's it. And that's the extreme version of this point I was making. An ineffective prohibition is very bad because you're imposing all these costs on people without getting a whole lot of benefit. So you'd either want to eradicate the industry, go all the way to here, or if that's not worth it, you'd want to just stay at the competitive level, which I guess would be over here. Right? That's the answer. And then what would determine which one you want to do? Well, which one you want to do would be determined by how big the externality was. If the externality was huge, you'd want to exterminate the industry. Otherwise, tough crap. You can't do anything about it. Yeah?
Sorry, can you just explain real quickly why the point where the d minus k line crosses marginal cost isn't in some way an option?
You could go to this point here. You could say at that point, marginal social value, which is measured by this line, k down from the demand curve, right? Because the height of the demand curve is the marginal private value. To get the marginal social value, we got to subtract k. So that's the marginal value to society of an additional unit of output. And at the competitive level, we got too much output, right? That, it doesn't necessarily cost it zero, whatever. That is, at the competitive level, we got too much output. Now, the usual Pigouvian story is, therefore, we want to tax this good and get the quantity down. But this isn't like Pigou, because that rectangle is not a transfer here. That rectangle is a cost. And therefore, it's very costly to reduce output. In fact, you almost never want to reduce output a little bit. It's not going to be enough for you. In this example, you're either going to, now here, marginal social value, right, equals marginal social cost. That would be the point you would want to be at, would be right there, that quantity level, which would correspond to Q star, which of course would correspond to a market price up here. That would be the minimum point, though. That would be the worst possible point. Because you reduced all these units of consumption where it was very inefficient to reduce output, and then you didn't do all the reductions that would be efficient, which is going from here to zero.